Machiavelli's lost secret, the power of saying nothing. Picture this. You're in a room full of powerful people, entrepreneurs, politicians, leaders. Everyone's talking. Everyone wants to be heard. And then someone walks in, says nothing. But suddenly, the room goes quiet. All eyes turn. Everyone waits. They command the room with silence. Why do some people have that kind of power? And more importantly, what did Machiavelli, master of what's between the lines, know about the power of saying nothing? Today, we're unveiling a forgotten secret. A lesson that could change the way you show up at work, in relationships, in life. Maybe your smartest next move is to make no visible move at all. Maybe your most powerful answer is silence. What if I told you silence could be the deadliest weapon of power? That when used strategically, it can dismantle enemies, build authority, and get others to do exactly what you want, without you uttering a single word. Intrigued? Take a deep breath and come with me into the boldest ideas of Niccolò Machiavelli. Ideas that have never been more relevant. Machiavelli lived at the turbulent heart of the Italian Renaissance, a time when the wrong glance could cost you your head. Amid conspiracies, political games, and quiet betrayals, he learned something few understood. Real power lies not in what is said, but in what is withheld. Machiavelli watched. He wasn't a warrior with a sword, but a strategist with sharp eyes. And his greatest weapon was reading silence. In The Prince, his most famous work, there's an unspoken constant. The real prince, the true leader, is the one who knows when to stay silent, who keeps intentions hidden, who offers less than he thinks and thinks more than he offers. But why is that so powerful? Because in a noisy world, silence becomes a riddle, and every riddle draws attention. Silence forces others to project, to fill in the gaps with fears, hopes, and assumptions. And when someone projects, they reveal themselves more than they mean to. They expose their hand, while you just observe. That's why silence, in the hands of someone who knows how to wield it, is a magnifying glass. It's not empty, it amplifies. It amplifies others' hidden motives while concealing your own. How many times have you lost power simply by saying too much? Without even realizing it, you may have given yourself away. Your doubts, your strategy, even your weaknesses. Because talking, more often than not, is a form of undressing. And the modern world, like the Renaissance one, is unforgiving to those who reveal vulnerabilities too soon. Machiavelli knew this. And he wasn't writing just for princes. He was writing for anyone who ever wanted to have influence. And that influence starts where most people are afraid to go. In the realm of the unspoken. Silence, then, isn't the absence of action. It's action in disguise. A deliberate choice not to reveal, not to rush, to wait for the right moment, or even better, to create that moment. Those who master silence control the tempo of the conversation. They set the rhythm. And whoever controls the rhythm controls the game. But does this still apply today? In an age of 15-second stories, has silence lost its edge? Speaking can be an act of strength, but it can also be a disguised confession. The moment we open our mouths, we unlock doors we might never have wanted to open. How many times has a long explanation convinced no one, only revealed desperation for approval or fear of losing control? Here's a subtle truth most people miss. Silence is not a lack of communication. It's a more sophisticated kind. In power dynamics, silence can be louder than any shout, because it carries mystery. And mystery breeds interest, respect, and sometimes fear. Ever notice how great leaders, in any field, rarely say too much? Think CEOs, generals, spiritual guides. When they speak, every word matters. Not because they know more, but because they speak less. And that's exactly why they're heard. There's a classic scene behind the curtains of power in a business meeting. One participant, very eloquent, tries to lead with words. He talks, argues, persuades. But in the end, the deal is sealed by the one who listened in silence, who absorbed everything, analyzed every look, and when he spoke, said only what was needed, and nothing more. Psychology calls this controlled ambiguity. When you speak less, the other side fills in the blanks. They guess what you're thinking, imagine what you want, and in doing so, they reveal more about themselves than they realize. You become a mirror that listens, reflects, and decides. Machiavelli understood this instinctively. To him, revealing intentions was a strategic weakness. A good ruler never shows all his cards, not even the good ones, because unpredictability is protection. And silence, in that sense, is a wall that guards your strategy. The downfall of many lies and the need to explain, to justify. The urge to prove something is what weakens otherwise smart moves. As an old Eastern proverb says, the tree that bears fruit lowers its branch. The one that shouts too much is usually barren. When we talk too much, we give others a chance to poke holes in our logic. But when we stay silent, we become a puzzle. And uncertainty is powerful, because the human mind hates the void. It rushes to fill it, with logic, with emotion, with projections. And each of those moves gives something away. But careful, silence is not avoidance. It's not fear. It's not passivity. It's presence, focus, calculation. It's an act of emotional intelligence. Knowing when to stay silent is one of the clearest signs of self-mastery, not of others, but of yourself. In a world where everyone wants to be heard, the person who knows how to listen in silence becomes rare, and therefore becomes valuable. A man who commands silence commands the ground where words are born, and whoever owns that ground writes the rules of war and peace. We live in an age where exposure is currency. Social media, Zoom calls, instant messaging. Everything pushes us to react, reply, speak, share. But the paradox is clear. The more we expose ourselves, the less impact we have. And silence, in this landscape, becomes a revolutionary act. Strategic silence today is a form of presence management. Instead of being constantly visible, you become selective. And what's selective is precious. When you choose when and how to speak, your words gain value. People listen more closely because they know you're not speaking out of impulse. In the corporate world, silence can be a powerful leadership tool. A manager who listens before reacting, who pauses intentionally before replying, exudes confidence. That silence says, I think before I act. I weigh before I judge. And that inspires trust, a rare asset in today's workplace. In personal life, too, silence shows maturity. Talking through a relationship, resolving conflict, even ending one, all of it requires more listening than speaking. When you silence yourself to truly hear the other person, without preparing your next response, you connect. You understand. And in understanding, you have the power to transform. On social media, where everyone has an opinion on everything, silence can be a form of emotional armor. You don't need to comment on everything. You don't need to join every controversy. Sometimes, saying nothing is the most powerful response. Because in those moments, silence says, I don't let the world control me. It shields you from superficial noise and from toxic exposure. If Machiavelli were alive today, he'd likely use social media sparingly. few words, quiet moves, silent strategies, because he knew true power isn't shouted. It's suggested, hinted, and most importantly, earned in the invisible where no one's looking. And here's the practical key. Effective silence isn't just staying quiet. It's intentional quiet. You go silent with purpose, to observe, to understand, so that when it's time to act, your move has impact. And when it's time to speak, your words have direction. Start small. Instead of replying to criticism right away, wait. Instead of interrupting, listen all the way. Instead of justifying everything, let others draw their own conclusions. And notice, the more you hold back, the more you grow inside. Because silence is strength training for the soul. To stay silent is to trust yourself. To trust that you don't need instant validation. That your presence is felt, even when unspoken. That your absence can sometimes speak louder than your presence. And that true power, the kind that transforms, happens long before words and long after their echo. So next time someone tries to provoke you, or the world demands a rushed answer, remember Machiavelli and choose silence, not as avoidance, but as control. Let me ask you something, sincerely. How many times have you regretted, not what you didn't say, but what you did? Maybe you gave away something you shouldn't have, or tried to fix a situation and only made it worse. Maybe you told the truth, but at the wrong time, to the wrong person. And because of that, lost an opportunity, a connection, a reputation. Have you ever felt like your words betrayed you? That feeling is more common than we think. Most of us were taught to express ourselves, to argue, to be transparent. But is transparency, without filters, just another form of exposure? And does exposing everything mean losing control? Now think with me. When was the last time someone impressed you by staying silent? Maybe in a job interview, when they answered with calm and pause. Or in an argument, when they chose not to fire back. Or maybe in a meeting, where a single silent glance had more weight than a dozen arguments. Have you noticed how well-used silence just hits different? But I get it. Silence is uncomfortable. Most people don't know how to sit with it. In elevators on dates, during awkward pauses, we rush to fill the space. Because silence forces us to listen to something deeper, ourselves. And maybe that's the real fear, what silence reveals. Now imagine if you started using that to your advantage. If instead of reacting on impulse, you made space. If instead of explaining everything, you let others interpret. Have you ever thought about what people imagine? When you stay silent, that imagination is powerful. Because people project their own fears, desires, intentions onto silence. And when you master that tool, you no longer need to convince anyone. They convince themselves. So, let me ask honestly, are you comfortable with silence? Or do you talk because you fear losing ground? Because you feel you always need to prove something? Because you're afraid of seeming weak, distant, indifferent? If that's the case, know this. True power lies in not needing to prove. Real men, the ones who leave a mark, who build legacy, who lead without forcing, are the ones who speak less and live more. Who choose their words like a sculptor chooses the chisel. Every gesture intentional, every absence a presence. Do you see yourself in that? Or do you feel like you've been speaking too much and listening too little? Take a breath. Close your eyes for a few seconds. Now think, in what area of your life would silence be most powerful today? Maybe it's at work. Maybe at home. Maybe within yourself. Maybe it's time to stop trying to understand everything and just observe. Because when you observe, you see, and when you see, you begin to understand where the real movement is happening. So what if you tried practicing silence today? Here's a simple exercise if you're open to trying. In your next difficult conversation, try not to interrupt. In your next argument, try listening more than you speak. In your next moment of doubt, instead of seeking answers right away, just sit with it in silence. You might realize the world keeps turning, even when you're not explaining everything. In fact, it might turn even better. Because when you go quiet, you create space. And space is one of the greatest luxuries of our time. Space to listen, to feel, to discern. And that discernment is what separates the impulsive man from the strategic one. Would you rather be heard now or respected forever? Machiavelli once said, "It is much safer to be feared than loved." But maybe, in the 21st century, that quote needs an update. It is much smarter to be unpredictable than predictable. And silence, by nature, is unpredictable. It disarms, unsettles, and transforms. And more importantly, silence is a form of power that doesn't depend on status, wealth, or looks. Anyone can use it, but few dare to, because silence demands self-control, and self-control is the foundation of true authority. Do you feel like you have that control? Or are you still swept up by urgency, by others' opinions, by the need for approval? If so, breathe. That's not a flaw. It's just a sign that a new path is calling. A quieter path, a more subtle one, a more strategic one. A path where you speak when you choose to, not when you have to. And that path starts now. So tell me, would you be willing to be the man who impresses without speaking? Who persuades without debating? Who transforms without putting himself on display? Because that man exists, and he could be you. It all begins with a choice. To go quiet in order to understand. To silence in order to master. To observe before you act. So let me ask you again. What is the silence you need to start practicing today? The silence Machiavelli cultivated wasn't just empty space. It was a tactic, a shield, an art form, a territory of invisible power where the sharpest minds ruled, not by loud words, but by the kind of presence that speaks without sound. In this video, we dove into that forgotten secret, the power of saying nothing. We saw how, for Machiavelli, revealing your intentions meant giving up your edge. How talking too much was like lowering your guard. He understood that words can be weapons, but silence, when well used, is the entire battlefield. We explored how silence triggers projection, the psychological reflex where others reveal more when you speak less. And this isn't just a gut feeling, it's backed by modern psychology. Daniel Kahneman, Nobel Prize winner and author of Thinking Fast and Slow, shows how the brain fills in blanks using unconscious patterns. Well-placed silence does exactly that. It forces others to project, and in doing so, they reveal themselves. We also revisited the idea of controlled ambiguity, a concept from behavioral psychology that explains why mystery often holds more sway than explanation. The less you show, the more others interpret, and the more you control the emotional and social game. We brought silence into the modern context. Work, social media, relationships. And we saw that in each of these spaces, well-used silence communicates confidence, authority, and maturity. We even cited an Eastern proverb that echoes Machiavellian wisdom. The tree that makes the most noise is usually barren. The fruit of silence, on the other hand, is presence. And all of this converges into a single, powerful truth. Real power is knowing when to stay silent. And more importantly, why? In today's world, where everything is loud, exposed, and instantaneous, the man who can go quiet, who can observe, who can wait for the right moment to speak, becomes the exception. And every exception has value. So the next time a situation demands a reaction, a reply, an explanation, remember Machiavelli and ask yourself, do I really need to say something? Or has my silence already said enough? Nunner, Renway, Adiol Ranalwa. If this message stirred something in you, if it made you reflect on the power of silence, the weight of a pause, or the value of not always responding, then maybe this space is worth returning to. Here, the goal is always the same: to share ideas that don't shout, but resonate, that don't impose, but stay with you. Ideas that provoke, not through volume, but through depth. So, if this kind of conversation speaks to you, feel free to subscribe. No rush. Take your time. Let even that, the act of subscribing, be a quiet gesture, but one full of intention.